Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 50 of my 2020 reads. This week was an excellent reading week. I read 4 books, 2 of which were buddy reads, and all of which were 5 stars. First, I finished A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin, which I buddy read with Andreea at Infinite Text, who I will link below. I am so glad that Andreea suggested we buddy read this months and months ago, and I said, okay, in December we'll buddy read it, and it was just so perfect. I have not read much by Le Guin. I've read a couple of short story collections by her, and that's it. I haven't read any of her novels, but this is something that I have been meaning to get to. If you saw my Physical TBR video, which I will link below, you'll know that I have this huge collection of all of the Earthsea books that Sush had got me, so I'd been meaning to get to this. And we read the first book together, and it was just so great. And it was so perfect for the holidays. When I'm in this sort of holiday mood, all I really want is to read a ton of comfort things. And for me, that's romances and middle grade and fantasy, and this was just lovely. It has this very classic epic fantasy feel and also sort of a fairy tale feel. It's kind of somewhere in the middle of those two. And Le Guin wrote this, I think, in the 60s. It has a lot of the classic tropes, but I think she also does some really interesting things with it and says some interesting things with it as well. I was super engrossed in it. I think her writing is absolutely lovely, and it just was the biggest, I don't know, just such a comfort read for me. I was reminded of the way that I felt when I was in junior high and had just discovered fantasy and would spend every second of every day that was free reading fantasy. Just that immersive feel. I really, really enjoyed it. And the plot, if you don't know, is about basically the backstory of somebody who becomes the greatest wizard of Earthsea, which is this collection of islands, like an archipelago, where magic is drawn from knowing the names, the true names of things, and using the power of wind and light and things like that. It is just a really epic story of a boy growing up and really learning a lot about what it means to be a great wizard. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I will definitely be continuing in the series. Next, I buddy read The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, which I buddy read with Laura at BookBubbler, who I will link below. And I think going in, both of us were a little bit intimidated by this book. It was one of those things that we'd heard great things about. It seemed like it was addressing really interesting topics, but also that it would be really, really heavy. The premise is basically that there is a boy in the 60s who is a super upright citizen, but he is black and he gets caught up in something that is totally not his fault, but he gets sent to a reform boys school, which really is sort of almost like a juvenile detention center, even though it's called a school. And there's a lot of abuse that happens there, and it talks about kind of how that affects him and the other boys and the lasting impacts of it. So we were expecting something incredibly heavy, and it ended up being really, really approachable. So the content definitely does touch on really tough topics, but it does it in such a way that you're really drawn into the story and you are able to handle everything. Whitehead is so gentle with the reader. There's a lot of like fade to black scenes that would have been very gruesome if he had actually shown them. So you know what's going on, even if you don't have to put yourself through that kind of emotional wringer of experiencing firsthand all of that violence. I loved the way that he used this historical fiction, which is based on a real school that existed, by the way, to talk about a lot of the issues that face young black men that are still relevant today, and the way that he talks about, you know, kind of the history of violence, of racism, of the abuse of boys, and just there's so many great themes in this. Obviously, this is really well known by so many people as an excellent book, and I'm fully on the Colson Whitehead fan group now. I definitely want to go and read his other works. This was 5 out of 5 stars. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and if you're like me and that you were worried about it being like too intense and that it might be hard for you to handle, it's actually very, very gentle with you as the reader, so I think you should go ahead and pick it up. Laura and I had such a great time discussing this, and we really cared about the characters, and it was just excellent. Next, I finished Sana Sana by Ariana Brown. This is a poetry collection that I heard about from Priscilla at Bookie Charm, who did a review of this as well as another poetry collection. I will link that below, and I really recommend you check out her review if you're at all interested, because it's very good and it's what convinced me to pick up this poetry collection. This was such a great collection. It's really everything that I'm looking for in poetry. I find that Priscilla's recommendations for poetry are spot on for what I like, and this one was just filled with so many great things. Ariana Brown is Black and queer and Latinx, and her poems are all about her identity. They're about her celebrating who she is and also her anger at the other people who try to keep her down because of who she is. They've got such power and such emotion. I love the themes. I love the topics. I will also link below a poetry reading that she has done of one of her poems that Priscilla had also linked. And if you're at all interested in like checking out what her style is like, I really recommend that. I had watched that before reading the poetry collection, and that also really enriched my experience because I could hear her voice as I was reading the poems. It was such a great experience. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I really, really loved it. And if I can get my thoughts together in a coherent manner, I will probably do a standalone review for this one too. And lastly, I finished Seeing Gender by Iris Gottlieb. I'm pretty sure that I heard about this one from Rogan Shannon, who I will link below. This is a graphic nonfiction about gender, and I loved it. It was so, so good. One, I really, really like nonfiction that is illustrated. There's something about it that appeals to me. I think it's just because I love graphic works and I love nonfiction and I love the combo. But what this does is it basically is sort of a primer on a lot of issues of gender. It walks you through all of the different facets and aspects and sort of just a high-level overview of different issues related to gender. So kind of what is gender, what is sexuality, what is sex, what is just sort of the interactions of all of these things, what are the issues faced by different groups within the LGBTQ spectrum. All of these different questions. I really loved the intersectional approach that Gottlieb took. There was a lot of looking at things like, for example, with intersectionality, how people who have multiple marginalizations really face much different types of discrimination than people who have just one. Or even things like, for example, there's a whole section on how Black men face a lot of police brutality and mass incarceration, or things like how trans women face a lot of issues in terms of the bathroom laws that have been implemented recently. There's so many different things. It's very, very approachable, very readable. I loved the tone that Gottlieb took as well. It was just so, I don't know, gentle and caring and respectful. It was beautifully illustrated, so colorful, lots of little highlights of certain people who have been influential throughout the kind of history of LGBTQ stuff. So things like Prince or Marsha P. Johnson or anything like that. It's just so many great things. And at the very end, Gottlieb also has like a little bit of a section just about her own journey with her gender. It is such a great book. I definitely recommend this one. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm totally getting myself a copy of this. Okay, so those are all of the books that I read this week. If you guys have read any of these books, if you have any thoughts, any comments, any recommendations, anything at all, go ahead and leave me a comment down below.